Thank you all for joining me to hear me talk about my work in progress, which is a book that deals with a lot of things, but it's entitled Fan Practices for Language Teaching and Learning. And so I want to give a little background before I tell you more about my book. I'm a researcher and professor at the University of Maryland, Baltimore County. I do work in applied linguistics, and I'm really interested in people who do language learning for fun and how we can bring that into the classroom when we're teaching languages. So there's some concept called language learning beyond the classroom. Here's a cool quote. An estimated 80% of adult learning takes place outside of formal education. Formal education is the classroom. For additional foreign or second language learning, it's likely that out-of-class experiences play an equally important role. Raise your hands if you're one of those learning Korean, Chinese, or other, yeah, there we go, yeah. So anyway, I'm interested in people like you. And among those who are doing language learning beyond the classroom are those who do it in the digital wilds. And that means in online spaces. So the digital wilds are communities, networks where language learning occurs that are independent of formal instructional context. And again, that means not associated with schools or universities. And fandom is where we find people doing this sort of stuff. So raise your hand if that's you. Yes, all right, great. So what we're going to hear about today, this is the table of contents for my work in progress. I'm going to talk about chapter 4, which is the case of a Sherlock fan who is involved in Setlock. You saw one of those photos up there, right? That Sherlock fan was there. Those are photos from my summer vacation in 2013. If I'm fast, I'll give you little highlights from fan practices for which languages, where we look at the K-pop group and what's going on there with their language learning. But I want to talk more about chapter 4, again, more summer photos, which is looking at a very particular fan practice called spoiling, where we see a fan who is using engagement in setlock and spoiling, not only for her language development in English was her second language, but also her critical digital literacy skills. So this is a highlight, if you will, for why I want you to read my book when it's finished. Anyway, I'm going to introduce you to Stevie, and here's Stevie over here. You may or may not recognize Stevie. Some of you may be familiar with her, but she was one of the most active contributors to Setlock at the time, and she was a non-UK based fan. She was based in Europe though, but she emerged as a reliable poster of daily filming updates and compilations on Tumblr, as well as fast and reliable analysis and speculation on Twitter. This led to a lot of reliance on her, and she saw an explosion in her social media. I think within 1 week, she saw like a growth of 6,000 followers, but she had a lot going on. And anyway, this led her to producing every week these spoiler roundups, which helped with Spoilercast. Hint, those of you who want to hear the tea tomorrow, I'll talk more about this. But she ended up getting a lot of demands from people for more and more spoilers. And she started getting contacted from people from a lot of different backgrounds. And as her spoiler roundups got more demand, they got longer because she had to be more careful in how she was explaining herself. Um, and as these increased in length and popularity, there were additional expectations placed on her by people who asked her for things like, not only giving feedback or information about what was going on in the Sherlock fandom, but like life advice. Coming to terms with one's sexuality, other topics often explored in fan fiction and fan discussion. So she realized that she was dealing with things that required sensitivity, and this put extra demand on her English to be understood. And due to the massive increase of hits and followers due to Setlock, this is a quote from her, I somehow became someone who was consulted on various things, and I realized that if I wanted to help and give answers, etc., I'd have to make myself understood in the way I wanted to be. That's when my answers got longer and more in depth, as I wanted to make sure my ass was covered. She goes on to explain, and I talk about this in her chapter, about how she developed kind of more international English as a way to address both native speakers and non-native speakers of English, and how she had to be more careful with her humor and sarcasm and other things. But that her involvement in Setlock also fostered her critical thinking. And she says, I know I have these tools because of fandom, to think differently, to think critically, especially to try to see it from a different point of view. And that fandom provided me with so many tools regarding my own everyday life, and also accepting the other lives around the world as part of the whole. All right. I mentioned the Spill the Tea Party. If you want to hear more about this, please come tomorrow at 11 o'clock. And for those who are here for this, I'm in my grace period. I'm in my grace period. This is chapter 3, where I look at what are fans doing, what fan practices they engage in for different languages. And I did what's known as a scoping review. It's a certain kind of research synthesis. And I identified 107 studies of fans learning language through fan practices, of which, or that were related, of which 40 of them made the cut. And those who are interested, this is the breakdown of what languages those fans were learning. Not surprisingly, a lot were doing English, Korean is second, Japanese, Spanish, Chinese, French. This is limited. You have to read the chapter to find out more. But what were those Korean fans doing? These are the fan practices. Fan translation, most common practice. Discussion or interaction, fan paratext, commenting, consumption, and reading webtoons. This is different from what we see in English. But again, read the chapter for more. And stay tuned for my book. Did I make it? Did I make it? Woo! Yes! Okay.
I'm number 2. So no, but literally nobody wanted to be number 2. So I said I would step up because you